Turn good intentions into meaningful psychosocial controls.
This is not a drill.
Welcome to This Is Not a Drill. I'm Briar Harold.
And I'm Hazy Serrels.
This is a podcast where we explore psychosocial risk, workplace mental health, leadership, and the systems shaping modern work.
With practical conversations about what organisations can do to create healthier, safer, and more sustainable workplaces.
Let's talk about it. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our first episode. We're really excited to see where this podcast takes us.
And it won't normally just be the two of us. We will normally have a guest and people with more knowledge and experience. But for today, it's really just to give you a bit of a feeling for what the podcast will be, and we'll be exploring a little bit of this topic of psychosocial hazards.
Oh, Hazy, I think you'll be my favourite guest so far.
Oh, better be.
So I think one of the most interesting things about this conversation is that most of the time, most organisations aren't doing nothing. I think workplace mental health has come a really long way, particularly in the last couple of years. So where do you think the next challenge is actually emerging?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, definitely. People are doing something. There's always good intentions. I think most organisations that we work with, as you know, they've been investing in this probably for a few years, especially like if not before COVID, then definitely after COVID. That really ramped things up, and yes, we need more wellbeing and pastoral care and that needs to be a part of everything.
Why do you think COVID brought that to the forefront where maybe it hadn't been there before? Is it just because people were at home?
Yeah, I think we all lost interpersonal connection and we didn't have a substitute, and so then people weren't well. Like, people were struggling, right? So, and I think that was becoming obvious, and they're at work, but you can't go anywhere, but you can still do work.
Yeah.
So I think it just came out a lot more there. It's my guess. It's probably a bunch of other factors too.
And do we think potentially, I mean, I know obviously COVID was not the catalyst, but I do think just, the amount of work and expectation on just Australian workplaces in general sort of has broadened or smudged the lines between work, particularly with work from home, and sort of outside of work life.
Yeah, well, definitely. And I think we actually brought more of our human selves to work. You know, like you'd be there and you're in a hoodie and your kid walks in and, like...
I think we've all been there.
Exactly. Yes, no, that's right. I think we brought in our humanity, and I think that showed, because I think, somewhere along the line we thought, all right, well, at work we're robots. Yeah. At work we just come in and we kind of, we used to have that phrase of like, you leave all your baggage at the door and you come in and then you pick up your baggage and you go home. But that's really, and that's helpful in a way, because yes, of course we have to have a professional demeanour and all of that, but we don't actually drop our baggage. Like, it's just not possible to do that. You can't stop being human for 8 hours and then you pick up being human, especially if now we're working all the time and we're available all the time and we're connected all the time. So I think that's why it kind of pushed it forward a bit more. And also obviously all the research around that harm does get caused in workplaces. It's not knowledge workers just as much as brickies, right? Yeah. And I do think there is something to be said about, how much progress has been made for Australian workplaces. And I think, particularly the majority of corporations that work with us, but, just in this space in general, how much investment there has been in understanding and protecting employees' mental health. And I do think that sort of progress should be recognised. Yeah. I guess for us, or what, would be really interesting to sort of get a handle on is, where do you think organisations have improved? Yeah, well, okay, where they've improved for sure is we're doing something. So I think that was the benchmark around, okay, are we doing something? We need to do something, we need to offer something. And I think most organisations now have come to that party around, we're doing something. But I think that's the next, where we're at now is the next challenge, and definitely what the codes of practice and what the legislation and the regulators are now asking for is less about are you doing something, and more about, are you doing the right things? Like, you're actually controlling for the hazards that exist. Yeah. And how do you know that it's working or not working? How can you quantify it? Can you show evidence of it? Do you have something that you can, hand on heart say, yeah, we're controlling for that hazard in this way? It doesn't have to be perfect. I don't think perfection is what this next stage is for. but rather can we lift it above just doing something to, we know what we're doing, it's targeted, and this is how we're kind of getting evidence of it, is I think where we're at now.
Yeah. And why do you think that shift happened? Because like you said, most organisations have been doing something, and I think the conversation around mental health has been happening for, years and years and years. Why do you think there's been the extra step in, I guess, demonstrating the impact of said controls?
Yeah. Well, I think two things. Obviously, the regulators and the new codes of practice and what the courts are ruling in this space is a big reason. And that would have been like 3 years ago or whatever, really when it started to kind of come out into our conscious awareness in the workplace. But I think also, just doing something is not changing it. So
it's a change.
It's not having that, the amount of impact that we need there to be. So it's not having the effect that we would like to see or that we need to see to make sure that it's sustainable and that we are actually protecting against hazards, I think is what has led to where we're at now.
Yeah. And how do we sort of know, or I guess in your space, how do you know when something is working?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Is that the money question?
Yeah, probably the money question. I know. How does anyone know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know, because obviously we don't have yet enough evidence or research or benchmarks or anything that we can put kind of a solid hand on to say, okay, if it looks like that, then that means we're doing it. But what we do have is obviously a really clear guide around, the hierarchy of controls and, are we actually approaching it in a multi-pronged way, or are we just kind of throwing one thing at it? And at what point are we doing that? Are we doing that in a preventative way, or are we doing that in the damage has happened and now we're doing the support afterwards? Yeah. So we know what questions to ask ourselves. I think there's really good guidance around what questions to ask ourselves as organisations. And then we need to gather then the evidence around, okay, well, this is making a difference. How are we seeing this play out in then the surveys we're sending and what our employees are telling us, and reduced rates of psychosocial harm. Yep.
And I think that's key. And I know you touched on it earlier around the codes of conduct around psychosocial risk. So we hear that phrase, I think, particularly in our industry and particularly with this change in the codes of conduct. We hear the term psychosocial risk all the time. But I do sometimes wonder whether we lose sight of what we're actually talking about when we talk about psychosocial risk. So, psychosocial risk or hazards arise from, work design and how work is experienced.
Yes.
But in the simplest terms, what are we actually talking about when we talk about psychosocial risk?
Yeah. And I agree with you. The terminology is very unfortunate, psychosocial hazards. But really what it comes down to is, and hazards come up very rarely on their own. Like they're usually a compounding, they have a compounding effect on each other. And I think it's just, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about in the workplace, particularly for knowledge workers, because obviously this has been something that's really well known for the kind of, blue collar industry and the kind of manual work industry. They've always kind of been on top of this, not necessarily the mental health thing, but definitely just this idea of hazards. But, in that, as knowledge workers, what are the things that the work that we do that may cause harm? So what are the elements of it? And of course, when it comes to humans, what causes harm for us in the psychological realm is emotions, usually. So are there emotional bricks that are falling on people's heads, whatever they may look like? And are there difficult or challenging interactions? Like, am I working with, politicians, and I don't have any kind of control over them, and they're directing so much of my work and where my efforts need to go, but I have little control, and they are not held accountable in any way. Those are the things that cause harm over time.
Yep. And I do also think that sometimes where organisations can get sort of caught up or frozen, I guess, is sometimes some hazards don't have a fix. And so people sort of freeze or stand back from the hazard, and then it's not controlled or protected at all. So what do organisations usually miss when they're looking at or working through psychosocial hazards individually? Or for particular roles, in particular role design?
I think, definitely. I think, if they can't where we're at today, I think, is that if we can't eliminate for it, then we freeze and we don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So I think it's because, again, not lack of intention. I think the intention's there, and I think organizations want to do something and look at doing something, but perhaps there's a little less guidance and clarity around, well, what can we do about these harder, more ambiguous hazards like cognitive fatigue and high work demands and the impact that has. I mean, and a lot of the time we think that we're solving for something, but actually high work demands on its own might not actually be the hazard. That's not it. It becomes a hazard because actually I'm a remote worker and our knowledge management system is shit or terrible.
Yeah,
interesting. So then that is what then makes that the hazard. So then I think that's one of the things we miss is that, one, we might just not do anything because we think, well, we can't eliminate, so I guess we're stuck with that resilience training. Or we are trying to solve for the wrong thing and we're focusing in on something that isn't actually the hazard. High work demands is very rarely a hazard on its own. Like, there's lots of other things that kind of come into play, not for every industry, but
which could actually, when looked at, be far simpler to protect against comparatively to trying to eliminate high work demands. All right, so then in that sort of context, how would you sort of say that hazards build upon each other?
And how do they compound each other?
Yeah.
Well, definitely in that way. So one, the hazard itself is a demand, so it can create stress, which is, I think, what the legal definition is, even though I'm not particularly in love with that definition, but that's the one we're working with right now. So it can create some stress.
Send some feedback through.
Create some stress, but then also maybe there's another hazard that comes in, which is removing access to protections or supports, which then means that I've got a little less, which was what happened with COVID, right? We had less access to supports and then we didn't know what to do with that, and plus work demand increased for a bunch of different industries and roles. So yes, they can interact with each other or intersect together because two things are happening at the same time. So I'm dealing with traumatic material and I'm working in isolation, and I've got high work demands, so all three, so that's kind of pressure cooker situation. Again, I can probably deal with that fairly well most of the time, but then you change one small thing, now I'm out of balance. Or I've lost a supportive leader that was holding things together for me while I dealt with really aggressive customer behaviors, and I'm in a really small team and my leader was actually instrumental to that buffer. They served as the biggest buffer. There's things like that can happen, and they're always in a state of flux.
That's also what I find really interesting, and a lot of the time, when working with organizations, is trying to get the understanding across that there could be very similar hazards across organizations, but they may not be of larger impact in one organization or one workforce comparably to someone else. Why do you think that is? And then how does that link into why, consulting on psychosocial risk is so important?
But again, I think it comes down to all protections exist, and we know that for some hazards, high work demands is really well managed for with good supportive leadership and good role clarity and role control. So if those things exist, then we can potentially have an industry that's really working at a very high level of pace for a period of time and can be really high performing and probably sustainable, particularly if we've got really good boundaries around when work starts and stops, etc., which is probably something we did lose, and we have lost the last few years, which we would have had in the 2000s,
Particularly with like phones and emails and Teams and just, the life we all live.
Exactly. We've slowly lost that ability to just, I might have been at the office until like 9 p.m. But when I left, I left. So, and that's a little less available to us now than it would have been in the good old days of the 2000s before technology took over everything. But so I think there's that still exists. That's still in some industries, smaller organizations, startups can have a lot of like real strong cohesion and alignment to values, whereas the larger you get more disconnected from meaning and values. And so meaning and purpose, maybe then if my leader's not doing it intentionally for me, it's a little less available to me than it might have been in maybe a smaller organization. And so then that changes then what protections are available to compensate or to balance out some of the demand. And so you have to, to consult on this, you have to be looking at both those things. It doesn't have to be an external consultant. We can do this in-house, but we have to be thinking about it through that lens.
Do you have any examples of organisations that maybe have gone through sort of that growth where, because I think that's such a good point, where you're a smaller, more tight-knit organisation where, yes, connection to values, you have access to most people that you work with from senior leadership, across the spectrum, about how, we might have worked through quite a significant growth period and some of the things you might have looked for.
And how that changed
Yeah,
probably.
Casey's like, let me get my Rolodex and I'll just give you one of 50 examples.
Yeah. I mean, it happens a lot because we've had such a lot of change.
Yeah. Or any example, I guess, really.
Well, that's right. I think but the biggest one that comes to front of mind, the first one, is that with big exponential kind of growth and change is you lose role clarity.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's your role, but then there's a bit of, lack of clarity around, well, where do I sit in the scheme of everything? You lose your connection to, well, what's our meaning and purpose? Not always. Some organisations do that fairly well, and leaders really communicate that really visibly. But potentially I lose my connections to my my sense of this is my tribe, because now, well, we're all dispersed a bit further out. So there's a bunch of things that I think come out and get washed around when an organisation is growing or going through a period of change.
And then some sort of ways in which that could be mitigated, because I think I hear a lot from a lot of different organisations. Oh, we'll just do some training or, run through this leadership trail, anything like that.
Yeah.
But are there sort of other things that need to go into it? It's not just a one-stop shop,
but I
really.
think
it's always more complicated.
Right. It's more complicated.
Yeah.
I think there's more things. And I think it comes down to what I said at the start around, well, where are we at now? We're not at the stage of doing something. We're all doing something. Now it's very much at is it targeted? Is it having an effect? So yeah, sure, training, that's fine. But let's make sure that training is fit for purpose, that it's actually targeting something. It's not general, it's not generic, it's not a one and done, but rather that it is focused and anchored on behavioural change, that it's really clear around, hey, this is going to be some training to help all of us carry the additional load that we're going to be holding for the next 3 or 4 months as we go through this change, or whatever it may be, right? So it's targeted and it's one thing that is being offered, and then there's all, these are all the other things that exist. You're kind of creating some structures of support around that's not just one threat, there's a few.
I actually think this is where it gets really interesting, because it kind of comes back to this point where not all activity, even though it's intentional, has the same function.
Yeah.
And just because something's useful doesn't mean that it's protective.
Yes.
And, so we get so much good feedback around, if we just go on the training example, so much good feedback about effective training.
Yes.
Useful, but does it fulfill the requirements of ticking, everything that's needed to be protective?
Yeah, that's right. And how do you take it to the next level?
Yeah.
Right? You're spending a lot of money on training and it's useful. So how do you, just a couple of small tweaks could take it then to that control, like it's serving as an actual controlling mechanism, not obviously on its own, but when you're embedding it into a system of support, that it's, yes, you're going to do this training now, but then we're going to follow that up in 6 months with this other thing, and then that's going to be followed up in 6 months with this other thing. And again, it doesn't have to be more training, but it can be, there's, we're speaking the same language, and there's multiple levers that are connected to that one very useful training, but it's not just, that's not where it is. Also, do we have evidence that training actually works? How are you gathering that information? Do you have data and responses to an eval or whatever it may be that actually target the skill and the behavior that you're looking to, put in place? Because resilience training, there's a place for resilience. Like humans are resilient, we need resilience. That is part of it. But then if that's all we're doing, then we're ignoring a whole bunch of other levers over here. So yes, do resilience training, do training around how to switch off effectively at the end of a work day. And then also, what are you doing with the work design? It doesn't have to be huge, but there's what else, what can you do there?
So is it that, and what's next connectivity, that's some of the most common mistakes, I guess, that organizations can make when they're trying to determine the difference between an activity and a control.
Yeah.
Are there any other really common ones that sort of come across your desk?
Well, I think that one, like, it doesn't tell a cohesive story.
Yeah.
That we're inadvertently sending a message around, okay, well, this is for you guys to solve because the training is not targeted enough or it's not linked to anything else. You know, it's an initiative that's only just about after the harm. So, you know, EAP and support, which is really important. You need all of that, but it's after the harm. And so then there's no other levers before the harm, you know, before the exposure or before the thing. You know, so what does it look like to look at it through that lens of what am I doing before, during, and after?
Yeah.
And do I have something I'm pulling in each? And hopefully one of those things is something like a work design. If the problem's coming from the work, then the solution needs to come from the work.
Yeah. And I think this is seeming to become more common, this sort of train of thought that, you know, there's almost a dismissal of EAP or a dismissal of training being effective or useful. Why is that unhelpful? And what should organisations also be looking for to, I guess, bolster up the control around those sort of activities as part of their psychosocial risk control framework?
Yeah, it's a good one. Because I think training is really helpful.
Yeah.
And we do training for physical risks. You know, why wouldn't we for psychosocial? So I think it's really important to do it, but it's not where you want to stop.
Yeah.
You know, it's maybe where you start.
Yeah. And maybe that's kind of where we've sort of come from, because I think training in corporate space around well-being and, you know, resilience, whatever, has been something that most organisations have invested in for a really long time.
Yeah.
I guess the next step is and then what?
Yes.
And how do we turn that into a control?
Yes, unless it's already serving as one. And I can think of lots of examples where, you know, for example, training your leaders really consistently, regularly. We've got a really great client that really has invested for about 5 or 6 years into this really effectively. And you're training your leaders up every 2 years, really deeply in how to have these supportive conversations. Well, you know that that's working. So that's controlling for that supportive leadership element. Is that all that they're doing? No, of course not. But in that case, then the training is enough. That's really, it's targeted, there's follow-up, there's good eval data on it. They're measured against then, you know, how they actually put into place and into practice some of the behaviors they've learned, you know, so on a yearly basis. And then they're always refreshed. It's not, we've just done it once and now off you go on your leadership journey, but rather it's something that is part of what I can expect as a leader. Yep. So you can do it really well, but again, that's one piece, right? So leadership support is only one part of the bigger psychosocial story that usually plays out in an organisation.
Yeah, you've mentioned the surveys a bit. What function do or should organisations try and get from wellbeing surveys? Because I think sometimes there's a bit of hesitation around surveying staff.
Yes.
I know that's certainly something that we talk about a lot.
Yeah.
So what are some of the positive functions, I guess? What should or could be avoided, or things that can make them more effective and actually get the data to improve? I
mean, there's a hesitation to survey stuff, but actually
there is, it's massive.
But everybody's surveying them, you know, with other things. So we're surveying them. I don't know a single organisation doesn't do regular surveys.
Yeah.
But then are we actually asking the right questions is probably what I would say. You know, can we, you know, you want to use that data. That data should be giving you insights into what's going on for your people. And I don't know if maybe somehow, somewhere along the line, we kind of got into a place where we just use a survey to say, yeah, all is good here.
Yeah.
And
I wonder if there's a bit of a fear around what the survey might say.
Yes.
So organisations almost need to be prepared that there might need to be, you know, a change or discussions around, you know, implementing next steps as a result of a survey. Yeah. Potentially.
Well, that's right. It depends on the survey, right? So if you're doing surveys that are really just about, you know, are we kind of doing okay, then that's fine, but you're not getting anything useful out of that. You're just getting a little tick off. Well, yeah, we're all right, and we can all kind of pat our backs, which is good. There's maybe a time and place for that, but then you do actually need a survey that gives you insight into, all right, well, if we could do something, what would it look like? What would it be? And yeah, maybe you don't have to. Maybe you are just patting yourself on the back all the time because you've just found the perfect organization.
Well done, you.
You've solved people issues.
We wish. So one of the things I think, I speak to a lot about with organisations is they can sometimes get caught up on whether a control or what they've done or implemented is good or bad. And I think maybe a more appropriate question is whether or not that control is meaningful and having a meaningful impact.
Yeah.
So what makes a control meaningful? And how should, employees or HR people approach this kind of landscape? Yeah,
it's a good question, because I think you're right. It's good to do something, and whatever it is that you can do, right? We all have different budgets and different authority, power, and decision-making power. So it's good to do something, for sure, we know that, but then it's good to then know, well, what is it that I'm doing? So what am I building? And sometimes it can be helpful to think about it in this way. So is this awareness building? Is it support, as in I'm providing them with extra support and, access to support? Is it capability building? Is it an intervention that helps me to detect whether there's a risk or whether somebody's not well or not coping? Which can be something that can, lots of different services can be structured around that. Does it actually control? Is it an actual control? So does it remove or eliminate or reduce the exposure in some way, shape or form? Or does it give me a sense of assurance that things are all okay? So it can be any of those things. Like it can be an intervention that ticks either many of them or just one of them. Maybe it is just awareness.
Some of them are interconnected.
They can interconnect.
Correct?
Yeah. It can be just awareness because that's where we're starting. But then how am I building on that? So it's all right that I'm doing something just for awareness building, and then that's just a big, there's a lot of organizations that will start with us and say, we've not done anything, we can't, they're not committed, we don't have buy-in. Well, let's just start with awareness. Like you're starting with that, but then what's the next step? How are you continuing that journey and continue to build the momentum? I think we're kind of, we stopped before, we'd do an awareness and then we'd stop. We're like, okay, we've done all of them, instead of realizing, okay, well, this one we've done and it's for awareness. And so now we have to do something that's going to be for capability. And now we have to do something that's going to be for actual control of, to reduce exposure.
Because awareness is what's brought the organisation on board to what's happening.
Potentially, that's right. Depending on where.
And then you can build capability because people are invested.
Because they're invested, because now you've got your leaders on board, or because now the exec are saying, oh wow, actually this is something, let's build more capability. Yes, I'm happy to release my people for capability building in this way. Or, wow, we really have to control for this. Let's do a little more about how we make sure that, we've got a aggressive customer intervention plan, because we haven't had one, and now we really need to put that in place, and that's an actual control. And, we're going to make sure that people know that at what point do they have to terminate the call, or whatever it may be, right?
Yep. And is that the other bit that I guess is kind of, I'm trying to think about how an organisation can approach this, and it seems very much that we as, Australian businesses need to, particularly in larger organisations, that it's no longer, and particularly under the Code of Conduct, it's no longer acceptable to just have a one-step kind of approach to a lot of these hazards, per se. That there has to be an understanding that there might be a step 2 and a step 3. And that's the review cycle, I guess. Right? And I think every organisation understands that to ensure something is effective, there needs to be some form of review and then reassessment of what we can do moving forward.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean, is your one step eliminating the hazard altogether? Probably not.
Yeah.
So in that case,
we wish.
That's right. Done. Gone. We're not working anymore.
Exactly.
So it isn't, right? Step 1 doesn't get rid of the hazard. The hazard's still there, and a lot of our hazards in the psychosocial realm we can't eliminate. Like you will have customers, you will have clients, you will have aggressive behaviours. You will have high work demand. You'll have politicians changing budgets and whatever.
Yeah.
So then, if that's the case, then our interventions and our controls need to be long-lasting. Like they need to be able to go alongside the way that the work goes, instead of well, we did it once, and then that's the end.
That's it.
Yeah.
So then, as an organisation, what do you think is a good first question to ask of any initiative you might be, attempting to implement?
Yeah. Well, I think I like that question around, what purpose does this intervention serve? Yeah. Thank you. I'm using my words.
I got you.
What does it serve? Is it awareness? Is it a capability? Does it serve some purpose? And so then now that I know what purpose it serves, then what do I need to kind of build around it outside of that? Because perhaps, I'm doing a capability session on people that don't actually interact with that particular hazard. We've had one example of an organisation that was training a whole bunch of people because they were just doing that. They were training people on vicarious trauma, but they'd also changed the work so that now a lot of roles didn't have to be exposed to traumatic content. But then they just kept doing training.
So just not fit for purpose.
It wasn't, well, that's right. So, I mean, that's the rare exception, that these kind of examples, but, there's, you don't need to lift capability for this group of population. Maybe awareness is still required because they're working alongside it or whatever you might need, but the capability wasn't necessary. And so then you could shift that control so it looked like something else. I can't remember what your question was, but yes, what does it serve? What purpose does it serve? And is it still serving our purpose after we've pulled a few other levers? And we have to kind of review that all the time because leaders leave and budgets change and roles change and we go through organizational change and now the job's different and technology changes the way that we do our work. And so then we have to then look at, all right, well now, given all of that, do we have the right approach?
And I think, it's interesting because I think what I've found quite insightful, particularly over the last couple of years, is that, a lot of the times the organisational roles haven't necessarily changed, but the clientele that we serve has. And I think that's been something that, I think a lot of organisations have really struggled with or been taken by surprise and can almost, it can be really hard as an organisation to suddenly realise and be like, my workforce is not managing. Roles haven't changed. We've still been doing all of these amazing initiatives. But, because of what's happening in the world and there's a lot of, financial pressure and sort of where, regular Australians are at the moment, that customer aggression has started to rise across so many industries and then that inadvertently becomes a psychosocial risk. So I think also being dynamic as an organisation and understanding that it might not necessarily be anything that you've done or done wrong that causes you to have to pivot in how you approach wellbeing for your organisation.
And sometimes we take it too personally. We're like, okay, well, it's because of me. But actually, you know what, the leaders that I like working with the most are the ones that say, it's been a little bit quiet for a little while. I'm a bit worried. That if
finger on the pulse, they're across it.
That's right. Like stuff is not going to go well all the time. Things will go wrong. We're humans. Humans bring weird, funky things all the time, and I don't think it's our job to eliminate that. And so now we're kind of in this really nice, happy,
well, it's unrealistic.
Right, Stepford wives. Is that Stepford? Is that what I'm thinking? Stepford? No, Stepford.
Yeah, I think so.
Stepford wives environment.
Back in the 2000s.
That's right. Well, AI might do that, but...
Is there another one with Harry Styles in now? There's a newer version.
Oh, they redo it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a similar vibe.
Yeah, okay, all right, that's good. Well, okay, more modern example. But I think that's not the goal, right? The goal is not to eliminate all the wrinkles of humans, but rather when the wrinkles of humans come up, that we've got enough support to catch it. And we're not going to catch all of it, but we've tried and we've done our duty. We've provided enough opportunities for support throughout the way. And, I think if we can have organisations that are doing that, then fab.
Yeah. And I think that can sometimes be a blind spot too, right? If an organisation has been managing the well-being of their staff really effectively for a long time, right? If they've got these big cycles of, ongoing training and leadership capability and finger on the pulse, and those interventions feel good, it can be quite shocking, and we just need to remain agile that they might no longer be serving the purpose of mitigating a new psychosocial risk and just being a little bit more open to that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's right. And that's why having multiple, you kind of know, well, we've got a few different things. So maybe one thing is now not really working so effectively, but, we've still got these other things over here that are still useful, and that gives me some time to be able to bulk up the other one or to figure out what it is that we're going to do.
So ultimately, the messaging is that very rarely would one initiative solve a psychosocial risk on its own. And generally it's intersecting interventions potentially timed out.
Yes.
Depending on where an organisation is at to truly cover off a control.
I think so. I mean, other people may disagree. Please disagree with me. But I think other than terminating that guy that was bullying and abusing everybody.
Yeah.
That's a nice, clear, sweeping, yes, we did it, they're gone. But every other psychosocial hazard really does play in with each other, and it changes, and there's a state of flux. And plus, we as humans bring stuff into the workplace.
I don't know what you mean, I'm perfect.
No baggage here.
Absolutely not. Right, so we're looking at bundles rather than silver bullets, I guess.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice. Okay, so where do you think support services and capability uplift fit within a broader control bundle?
Oh, yeah, okay. So very much at that kind of, we're building the skills, right? So, for example, we can't know what level of resilience someone's walking into an organisation with. In the same way, I use this example all the time, and it's probably a bit of a lame one, but when we've got cords in a room, right? So let's say we've got a cord in this room, and people are going to maybe trip on it. We don't go out to the market. And I mean, we might, but we don't go out to the market and we do tests to say, hey, well, how agile are you? Are you able to leap over these cords with agility and not trip over them?
How high?
That's right. How high can you jump? That's right. We don't do that. We just say, okay, well, let's just get rid of the cord.
Yeah.
And we might not be able to get rid of every cord, but because we can't always know with full confidence what level of resilience someone's coming in. The same way I don't know how agile or klutzy someone might be. We might decide, okay, well, let's just give them the skills. Let's give baseline skills around jumping over this cord with agility. Sorry, I'll stop the metaphor now.
I like it. I like it. I'm a visual learner. I'm imagining how everybody in this business would jump over a cord.
Leaping over
the joy it's giving me is crazy.
So we give the skills around, okay, and not everybody's going to take them up. Not everybody's going to be good at switching off effectively after work. Not everybody's going to always be able to access their wellbeing skills, but we're providing it as a baseline, right? We're saying, okay, as a baseline, here are some of the things that are going to be fit for purpose in a demanding role where you're going to be working, you're in a global organization, so you're working across lots of multiple time zones. You have to be really good at switching off. We're going to give you some skills around switching off. Not everyone will do that in the same way that you can train everybody to not show up to work under the influence, and then still some people do, right? Yeah. So that's, I think, where that bit comes in and becomes really important, because then we can say, well, we gave the skills.
Yeah.
And here we've given it, and we can say we've done that, and now the next bit is, well, we're trying to do what we can to remove the cords or to stick them down with some tape, and that's the leadership support maybe, or whatever. Right, then there's the other levers we're pulling.
I guess that sort of loops back to what you were saying at the start, where we're moving to is, for organisations to have the capability to demonstrate the evidence of what they have implemented.
And why they've implemented
it.
Like, what's the reason why? What's the benefit to it? Well, we want to make sure that people know how to switch off effectively, because in this business, we work across time zones, and people are often needing to dial into a meeting at 9 p.m. and we want to make sure they're going to be really good and able to switch off at 10. And we've given them some tools around how they can do that themselves. And then on our end, as organizationally, we're going to do X, Y, Z to make sure, we've got time in lieu and, a later start the next day, and policies around making sure that you're balancing your time or whatever. But you're telling the story around what does this link to and why.
Okay, so potentially the hardest question so far. So we know, and these, the code of conduct, like you said, has been in place for 3 years. I think a lot of organisations have done a huge amount of work to make sure that they're implementing frameworks to keep their employees safe. Why is it still so hard?
Yeah, where does it go wrong?
Yeah.
Well, I think sometimes, and particularly more complex organizations, it's tricky because there's almost like a diffusion of responsibility and no one wants to own it, or they feel like I don't know where it sits and I don't know who owns it. Then there's like a lack of clarity around where does HR stand and where does health and safety, and where I've seen it work well is where they've come together.
I was going to say, I feel like it does straddle those areas, and when we're consulting really well with organizations, it's when everybody does it together.
Yes, and where there's input from all the sides, right? So I think that's one of the things where it doesn't work, definitely that no one owns it or no one understands their role in it, in the risk. So then it's easy to just kind of throw bitsy things at it, and it doesn't have a cohesive story that it's telling, where we're not documenting what we're doing.
It's a big one, the documentation, and who should be documenting and where.
Yeah, and more, like that's what the regulators are saying that they're llooking for is, well, do you have documentation of that meeting? And yes, you might train your leaders, but are you training your leaders to document their conversations, and how are they documenting? And is there a place to document? I get asked that question a lot, like where should we be doing it? And there's no right or wrong. As long as there's some kind of guidance around it, can be really helpful, either make or break it. Data is collected, but then you don't do anything with it. It's not being leveraged, and there's just that disconnection between your different interventions. Like you're not actually pulling them together so that they're speaking the same language.
And I think, it's going to become particularly pertinent around, the evidence and the documentation of evidence, and particularly in New South Wales. I know this has already been implemented in some states, but it's going to have a huge impact on the claims process as well for psychological injury. And a lot of it is coming down to how effectively organisations are documenting that process to demonstrate reasonable action. So I think it's going to be a really big one. And it just seems so simple.
Yes.
But often the simplest things are sometimes the most complex, particularly in large organisations.
Where we don't have a system where who knows what, why are these people getting involved and not these people. That's right. And it's not always possible to have a central zone. You shouldn't necessarily always have a central zone for this. But what do you have?
Why do you think it is so hard sometimes to bring together those components of an organisation, like HR, WHS and operations? Is it kind of wondering if it's just time?
Humans?
The general state of where we're all at.
It's time, but also lack of clarity. And this idea of, we've done it this way, I don't want to do it a different way. We've just got so used to and comfortable with, particularly in the knowledge worker space, safety being very much in this corner and just in charge of these things, and we kind of divide it that way. Probably makes more logical sense to us to do it that way, and then we don't actually work collaboratively with each other, exchange knowledge or exchange data.
Perfectionism or being perfect obviously is just so unrealistic. So where do you think good looks like if we can't get to perfection in this sort of space?
I think good looks like, can you tell, I mean, this is what I've been saying so far, and it's probably going to evolve over time, but can you tell a good story around what it is that you're doing about the hazards? Do you know what the hazards are? Can you tell a good logical story of what it is that you're doing? And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you can tell that story. That it's a cohesive narrative. The intention's there, but also there's a meaningful why to what you're doing in response to that. Like you care, and care is now also a control because you've got a good, solid, comprehensive strategy behind it, or like you're telling a story. You can narrate it. And I mean, I say this whenever we run training for leaders. Like, can you tell the story of what hazards your people are dealing with, and how they effectively deal with it? Because of course they can, and they are, and they're doing the job. And there's lots of examples of many of our employees working in really challenging situations and doing it effectively. But can you as leader tell that story of what that looks like, so you can see it, you know what it is, you know when it's no longer working, and then what do we do as extra on top of that?
Is that sometimes what you know, just on management and the, you know, the importance of leaders in this space, are we sometimes asking leaders to manage risks without giving them sort of the opportunity or the tools to manage it effectively? Is that sometimes one of the
challenges?
Yeah,
I think so. I mean, sometimes you've got leaders that, you know, where you might train a leader in how to make sure that their people aren't getting burnt out, but they've got no decision-making authority
exactly,
to change priorities or to push back on deadlines or to, you know, push back on work or whatever it may be. So then in that case, you're putting pressure on leaders without any action that they can actually visibly put into place. So you're just displacing that hazard really, instead of actually addressing it. So yeah, again, it just comes down to, well, how do you know it's working?
Yeah.
How do you know that training on burnout management to your leaders actually worked? You know, because otherwise it probably didn't. You know, probably your leaders are sitting there going, well, I can ask if people are burnt out, but then when they tell me they are, I don't have anything to do.
Yeah, then what?
Yeah, that's right.
It's kind of that part.
What do I then do? That's right.
All right, so this brings us to the question that we ask every episode. Hazy, what is the uncomfortable truth?
Okay, yep. The uncomfortable truth, I think very much is care is not a control. And I think that can be sometimes hard because there's a lot of people with really good intentions and lots of care and they really, you know, want to do things. And I think that's a good place to start. So I'll take care any day of the week though, of course. But it's not a control. So care is great. Care is where you start, but then a control actually indicates, it shows change, that something is actually meaningful is happening, is important to go alongside the care as we go into this next phase of maturity.
Love it. Fantastic.
I'll ask you.
So I think, and definitely from this conversation and what you know, has been a main piece of conversation with a lot of organisations that we work with, is that good intentions are not enough.
Yeah.
You know, I think approaching any kind of wellbeing initiative with good, honest intentions is important, but it is not enough to solve or protect against risk. Like we've spoken about, there has to be follow through, there has to be review, and there has to be ongoing assessment as to whether it's effective.
Yes. Yeah. I love that.
Love it. And guys, we're not going to leave you with nothing at the end of each podcast. Please feel free to download the psychosocial risk controls framework here. There's a link through the episode notes or the QR code on your screen right now. Please use it to review current activity, identify where activity may be mistaken for control, and to strengthen the link between risk, action, and review.
This has been good.
It has been good.
Thanks
we actually
for
did it.
I think we did it.
We did it. Thank you so much, everybody. We really hope you got something from today. I know Hazy and I did. We will be back in your ears next month.
We will.